Welcome to what we surmise to be episode 24 on the End Also podcast, where Kirk and I take the previous week's sermon at Faith Alliance Church and we do magic tricks to it.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
not where I would have gone. Magic tricks.
I was gonna say
Nothing up my sleeve.
we bend it, or it's like a light, it's a sign
There
and a
is no
wave,
spoon.
and there is no spoon. Yes, we do things to it after a couple days of it being delivered, and talk about application and other things, and we do magic to it. That's what we do. Either way, we are
Dissected, perhaps?
we dissect it. That's a better, yeah. This so as just so we're going to tell you how the sausage is made, and really how the sausage is made is it doesn't get made before the very moment that I press record on the podcast. So my metaphors are magic, and Kirk's metaphors are more apt to dissect it. I'm like, okay, I like the dissection much better.
Sorry.
So there's a new rule is that I have to run all my metaphors past Kirk before.
Oh, I don't know. It's funny to watch you go. It makes for great conversation. Look at the hole he's digging. This is great.
let's see if we can undo that one. Well, we did with dissection. Well done. Thanks for bringing me out. So we are looking this. Actually, I've been looking forward to this episode. Partially because of the text that I preached on 2 days ago, which was Matthew 1:1 through 14, which if you'd like to look at it, you can, but if you wouldn't like to look at it, the text is just a bunch of Old Testament names with a few New Testament names in there. Kirk is going to read it for us. Is that what I'm hearing in that side?
No. Just a bunch of Old Testament names. These aren't just a bunch of.
I know. I'm downplaying it, but
these are important people.
They are, and so what I'm interested in actually is how we're going to take that and add magic to it, or dissect it, depending on whose metaphor you like better, and talk about the first 14 chapters in the book of Matthew, which is
or verses.
Verses, thank you. That's going to be a long.
Wow, it's a really long podcast. Buckle up, everybody.
Marathon podcast. But the first 14 verses, which really are, it's Matthew taking the lineage of Jesus and telling his readers, or his listeners at that point, who Jesus was and where he came from. So that said, why don't you start us out with your thoughts on Zerubbabel and Jothiel and...
So one of the first things that caught my attention, which I mentioned to you after service on Sunday, was how long it takes to go down this list before you get to Junior.
Yeah.
There's no repeat names until you get back to Jacob, which is like just before Jacob's the father of Joseph. So it's weird to me that there's nobody else whose name repeats on this list. Son of, right? There's all these son of, Ram and Ram Jr. There's no Ram Jr.
And they're I think what you're saying too is what's strange about that is that that wouldn't been out of place in Old Testament times to have,
or any time.
Well, any time, but I mean it would have been normal to be named after your lineage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Solomon Bar Solomon.
Right, yeah.
Why was there not? But interesting to me, that part. The other part that was interesting is that sermon was based on hope.
Mm.
And what is hope? And it's interesting that this is the text you chose for hope, because that made me think, what did each of these people hope for on this list? So each of these, John just inflated for those of you who
I just stared out the window wistfully.
And inflated to 3 times the size, which was really impressive to watch. But
because that's a great question that I didn't even think about.
Oh, sorry. There you go. So if the message is about hope and what hope means for us, we look at the Advent calendar and we're excited. We're hopeful for Christmas in a consumer way, right? Or because our hope has been realized in that sense, right? For us.
Yeah.
So our expectation has already been fulfilled in the sense of he was born and came to earth.
Right.
Was that the thought of Abraham? I don't think so. His hope was, I'm going to have a kid. That's amazing. I'm going to have land God promised, right?
Right. Yeah.
So his hope way back then at the start of this list, right? Because we don't go further back than Abraham.
No,
It
not
starts
this list. Yeah.
starts there. So we start at Abraham, and his story. So for me to have hope in anything, I have to also trust that it's going to do something.
Right.
So Abraham's hope was an obedience, right? It started with, for him, an obedience, trusting God, the voice of God.
To go from Ur.
To leave
Yeah.
a town with such a fun name like Ur.
Yeah. Where do you live? Ur.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it was like, what are we going to name this? We'll have a belching contest to see who can come up with the best name for this town. Bubba wins. Yeah, there you go. So it's just a strange and funny place for a name. It must mean something really cool in the original language, but translates oddly into English. However, that being said, so this list, if this is the list of the hope building over time, that snowball rolling down the mountain, then we start with Abraham and his hope for a future for his lineage.
Right. Realized in Isaac.
Realized in Isaac, but not, he wasn't aware of it until the visitors come, right?
Right.
Which I just made air quotes for.
Yeah.
So when the visitors come and Sarah laughs,
Right.
that where he's like, maybe, that's the start of hope, and that hope, of course, he tries to force into existence, hence Ishmael. But it's interesting to see, right? So there's hope and trust, and hope and wait. So he's moving westward the entire time.
Are you equating? So trust leads to hope. Abraham trusted God; it was credited to him as righteousness, but there's a hopefulness in that. Believed God, trusted God. Where would you put waiting in that? So I see trust and hope, and then where would you put waiting in that kind of equation? I guess
Waiting is part of the trust, because you could also say the faith, right? So his faith was credited to him as righteousness, right? So having faith that what was promised will be fulfilled, even if that's not fulfilled in your lifetime, but that your reason for existence, your daily steps that you take, the door you open, everything is leading toward this thing.
Would you now? I have made the case before that you can't make equations out of the Bible, and I still stand by that. However, I'm going to make an equation. Are you saying trust plus waiting equals hope?
Not precisely. I'm saying more that hope, I think, is hope is like a result. If you're going to make it mathematical, hope is a result of trust and applied faith. So in order to have hope, you need to there's something to look forward to.
Right. Okay.
Otherwise, what are we? There's nothing, right?
So there's an implication of waiting.
There's an implication of waiting, yeah. So the kid who hopes he gets the pony for his birthday, right? Every day, until the birthday it comes, right? There's that anticipation. I mean, that's like a crazy example, but in his case, in Abraham's case, head this way, right? So he's
Right.
being pointed west, and just okay, I will give you a land. Okay, cool. And it's interesting. He picks up all his stuff, and his nephews and everybody up and relocates, and they just start wandering west,
Right.
and they grow on the way. That's another interesting thing. So they're what they own grows, right? Because they have herds,
Right.
and then the family finally,
Right.
as
Yeah.
minute as it seems, with just one kid, right? But the family grows, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
So his hope, Abraham's hope, is the fulfillment of the promise of a land for his promised ancestors.
Huh. Yeah. So he wouldn't. So it's just that idea of what are they hoping for? Because I would say Abraham would have an explicit understanding of covenant.
Yes.
Obviously,
Yeah.
Genesis 12 and 15, well, mostly 15, but his explicit hope. Maybe later on in the genealogy, there'd be an explicit hope in the Messiah. But would Abraham have the language, the messianic language of, okay, this covenant promise for me to have lineage of the sand on the seashore and stars in the sky, because out of my would he has that for sure, he has, because God has promised with me the covenantal language to do this. We see on the other side that happened so that out of that lineage the Messiah would come. But would Abraham have had that clear of an understanding of messianic promise?
So he
And
would
I
have
don't-
known the stories, right? The hand-me-down spoken word stories.
Yeah, he would have. Yeah,
of the Genesis story, which he
Genesis.
is now part of, right?
Right.
But the creation story,
Right.
would he apply that to mean
Well,
a
that's just
Messiah?
it. Yeah, it's not hindsight bias at all, because there's some very specific prophecies along the way. But the Old Testament, there is it's not hindsight bias, it's fulfillment. So taking Jesus and looking back into the Old Testament makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot more
through that
sense
lens. Yeah,
through that lens.
Yeah.
But if you're looking forward and you're trying to navigate how is God going to bring redemption, Abraham sees, okay, God's going to bring redemption through Isaac, and through this family that He's promised. But and in fact, I'm not going to look there, but in fact, in Hebrews 11, doesn't it talk about Abraham looking for a city whose home is God? The idea that which he never got the sight of heaven. So the idea is, even Abraham wouldn't have had the language to understand messianic promise, but he would have understood the covenantal language that God had given him, and he would have hoped in that.
Yeah.
But not necessarily in waiting for the Messiah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because he's hoping for the fulfillment of the covenant,
Right.
which is my ancestors will be so extremely numerous, and this
Right.
they will have a land. That's that spot.
Right.
That's his hope. That's ancestor number one.
Right. And even until you get to the prophets. So once you get to Boaz, Obed, Ruth, then you start getting into more of the prophetic nature. So you begin to pick up more messianic understanding, David, and forward. But yeah, and I mean I don't know about the specifics of Tamar and Perez as far as like what they were hoping for, but it wouldn't be as clear as we have looking back, for sure. And that's really interesting, But but it would have come from the covenantal language of God, which and I'll say this too: they would have, at least from the time of the judges forward, when they started getting sick of the judges. So whatever, maybe Aminadab and Nahshon, maybe forward. That's a guess. When Israel started longing for a king, and then God giving them the king, that kind of that desire for a king to lead them, that's a messianic thread that they want someone to lead them, and
they want a face to put in front of other kings.
Right, and they keep getting kings that David, Solomon, and they keep hoping the next one is going to be the one. Even in the judges, they keep hoping the next one, and then they keep the judges keep messing up. So they keep wanting someone to lead them fully, and they're never able to satisfy that. So there's this line of Israel wanting a king, but never fully being satisfied by the king leading them. So there's even a messianic, at least, desire there, even if they don't have a messianic language, but still that idea of like what are they actually hoping for. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Just to imagine like this line to get to the person of Joseph at the end of this list. That's did Jacob have any idea? Joseph, he had no idea. That's why he was going to leave her quietly, right? So he was just hoping to get married. That's all. He didn't have any idea.
No, and even
guy, right?
And even when he was told directly, it took him a little bit to be like, oh, this is real. She didn't have an affair,
Yeah.
That's.
So I mean, all through this list, which we are scrolling through on our devices, of Matthew 1, it's just a fascinating line of where these are people who were notable enough to get their name inscribed in history here, right? And we know who these names are. We've heard these stories. We've seen people try to illustrate them. But how amazing. Like even David, was his hope that the Messiah would come through his line? Nah, I don't even think so. He didn't picture that yet.
Not clearly.
Yeah. Just that, would lead Israel, right?
Well, here, so I went to
yeah.
I did end up going to Hebrews 11 because I wanted to see if it was explicit in what it said, and it actually does tell us what Abraham was hoping for. So, and it says this. It's at Hebrews 11:10. It says, "For he, Abraham, was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God." Because he was promised this family, so he's looking forward to this city that his family will fill, but that's not messianic. It begins and ends with God, so the Messiah is implied in there. So I'm not. And this sounds like we're like removing the hope of the Messiah out of, and I'm not. But there is an understanding, or in Abraham's case, a lack of understanding of a direct line to Jesus in his thinking.
Right.
But he would have been wait. It says he was waiting for the city, that has foundation, whose designer and builder is God. So which again matches Revelation, which Messiah encompasses. But it's still not. This is a mind bender. We are doing magic.
Sorry. There you go. The other part of this story I like is when they bring up Ruth, because that's just a fun story to me to imagine. She stalks Boaz for a long time and just following you around. And all right, fine.
And that she's not Jewish by heritage. But she's a part of the lineage of Jesus.
A part of the lineage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, amazing. So many, like, these characters listed are all, like, just the addition of Solomon into that list, who, great leadership. And we all know the story of his wisdom. Mm-hmm. There are books in the Bible that are attributed to him. His list of physical locations around the countryside of greater Israel space, Israel, Lebanon, and South, there's physical structures that people can point at and say, this was from the time of Solomon. This was where he stored horses for when he traveled north, things like that. I mean, he had the place set up. It was pretty incredible, and he exists because of lust. Right?
Yeah,
David was happily married. Everything was cool. He had lots of kids.
Yeah.
Who end up getting their hair stuck in a tree, but still,
Yeah.
what a way to go. Hair stuck in a tree. But, oh my goodness, the greatest king out of the bunch, the one that everyone points back to as the greatest king of Israel, and for whom there is, even Queen of Sheba comes to visit, right?
That's true, yeah.
The reason that there even are, I don't want to get too crazy here, but the Orthodox of Ethiopia, right? We have this line to Solomon, and it's amazing and beautiful. So,
and yet he came out of this messy.
He is the product of human clumsiness, what appears to be human clumsiness.
Yes, yeah.
And God turns it around anyway. That's amazing and wonderful.
It really, and that's why, to me, that's why when I read that, there's just so much hope. It's like, well, God can really, in a very real way in the genealogy, but then in a very real way in just how God postures himself toward humanity to turn around stuff. Human clumsiness, man, that is good. I like that.
Well,
too bad we can't. I would love to record these before I preach and then steal all the good stuff.
Sorry.
Human clumsiness, dissecting. What did they trust at? Man, I'd be using this all over the place. But the fact that one of the things I love is the fact that it's not just mysteriously missing. That
it's not omitted.
That Matthew didn't remove the deportation or these messier parts of Israel's history, or he could have struck even Ruth out just by just omitting her out of the lineup because she's not by heritage a Jew.
She has her own book.
Yeah, all these things that you'd get that you'd easily kind of we don't talk about that. And the scriptures and because the person of God is like, no, we do talk about that because I've made good out of these things that human clumsiness would have said otherwise. So there's just so much hope in the genealogy, but it is easy to read and be like, oh
yeah,
man.
If you start poking at who are these people,
right, yeah,
they're as human as you and me. They're just folks making mistakes, folks who hoped one way and said, well, maybe God meant this. Right.
Well, and that even gets into even the birth of Jesus. Like, actually, I was reading, just in preparation for this week, I was reading Summa Theological, that Thomas of Aquinas, because he has all the stuff about the Advent, and he positions the whole. It's massive. I've only read parts of it, but a lot of it is argumentation. So he'll say, why did God do things this way, basically? And then he creates these kind of counter arguments, and then he responds by arguing, well, this is how, this is what, and he's weirdly thorough about it. He's like, basically, I'm paraphrasing, why did God allow the star to direct the Magi? Why did God use the shepherds to direct? And kind of, and as he's labeling these things, he's kind of like, the implication is, basically, well, if I were God, I wouldn't have done it this way. Like, why did God have angels speak to the shepherds? And and even he asks, why wasn't Christ the one who announced his own birth? Because it's a weird question to ask, but he's kind of saying, why wouldn't God just himself proclaim to everyone everywhere at the moment of Christ's birth, here he is, instead of having angels and angels and angels and angels to different people? He even asks, why didn't God announce the birth of Christ to Simeon and Anna in the temple? You know, all these people who are who are waiting faithfully
With
for the
hope.
Christ with hope, and they get to see the Christ and hold Jesus, but an angel, they don't get angel visitation. The shepherds do,
They get
and they could have cared less.
physical visitation
They
from,
do,
from
yeah.
the Messiah. That
But they don't get it
are
till
aware of.
later. I mean,
Yeah.
it's 8 days later, but they don't get it till later. So all that to say is he asks all these questions because he's bringing up kind of like the almost the weirdness of the rest of the Advent story about how like all these things that you wouldn't use shepherds, you wouldn't use, if you were a Jew, you wouldn't use the Magi, you wouldn't use like all these different, you wouldn't use a barn, a cave, you know, you wouldn't, all these things, you wouldn't use a manger, all these things that you just would never use, is exactly what God uses. And it's just this weird topsy-turvy picture of what the kingdom really is. And I think the genealogy sets us up to understand that a little bit more clearly.
Humble beginnings.
Yeah.
I mean, royalty along the way, but humble beginnings.
Right. And messy. Like it's not like,
Yeah.
So God himself isn't the person of Christ is perfect. He's born into this very imperfect system, you know, and even very imperfect lineage, to be honest. And to me, that's like, okay, if God's willing to go there, all right, there's hope for us.
What does that hope mean to you?
Oh, are you asking me?
Yeah. If there's hope for us.
That's man, you and the questions today.
Sorry.
I think just that. I think I would double down. I like the shepherds are some of my favorites, because they're the kind of the unwitting party of the bunch. Like they were just doing their job. Angels show up. In partially, maybe they're on my mics. I'm preaching on them this week. Angels show up. They hear this, this chorus, "Peace on earth, goodwill toward men on whom God favors," and they're like, should we go check that out? Like maybe we should go look. Like, and they're just, they just don't. They're the last people that anyone would ever ask, and they're the first people that the angels go to. So for me, I've probably said this 100 times before, but like, and other people have said versions of it, but if it were up to me, I would have given up on myself maybe 1,500 times by now. Just on my ability to follow Christ and all these things, right? But the Scripture says that God will continue and will complete that which He began in Christ Jesus in us. I read these things of these, shepherds and Rahab and even Jesse, Jesse, the father of David, he didn't see it, he missed it because he thought it was all the other sons.
Because they're living the life at their moment.
Right.
They don't. You can't see down the road the implications of the choices that we make.
Right.
Why we're here, what we're doing.
So for me,
we see just now. I'm
encouraged by that God uses those kind of people, and because of that, He can use me.
For me, the shepherds are a vital part of that story. Because I think that if you want to make an announcement in a quiet, sleepy little town that something eventful has happened, especially when everyone's crowded into houses with their relatives who are visiting because of the census, and it was nighttime, everyone was asleep. If you wanted to disturb the most number of people, you send in all the sheep and the shepherds. Who are, just wreaking havoc, running through the town, going, "Hey!"
They're like, "What's going on out there?"
Oh my goodness, we're just trying to sleep, right? So now everyone knows.
Do it.
Yeah,
that's funny,
right? Why are they rushing over to the barn, right?
Right. What's
so great in there?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
What's so great?
But the Magi and the star. That's another part. That's just sort of strange parts of the story. Of all the people on the planet, 3 recognize that star's moving.
Right.
And just to there.
Right.
And they come and meet up. That's just amazing.
Yeah.
I love that they all also understand that it signifies a special birth. That's interesting to me.
That they understand it.
How come?
Right.
Why? Why do these people understand that that's what that means?
Right.
That fascinates me. Who wrote that down somewhere that
What?
they were like, yeah, of course.
It came from, so you're right, it came from somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they said, yep, that one. We've been staring at the sky for years waiting for something.
Now it's time.
Yeah,
We're
look at
gonna
that.
follow it.
Clearly,
Ready?
load up the camels. We're off.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And that the scriptures record that the Magi are really the first to, it says that the shepherds show up, but
Which must have been, again, babies sleeping.
Yeah. We're here!
Hey, guess what?
Hey guys!
We heard this cool story just moments ago.
Is there a baby in here?
Yeah. Oh, and here's 6,000 of our sheep. Sorry about the mess.
But it's a barn, so we don't have to clean up.
Yeah.
But with I think so the shepherds show up, but I think the Magi are the first to. It says I'd have to look this up, but I think it says they came and worshipped. So they're the first recorded worshipers of the Christ, and yet they aren't Jews. They're very much Gentiles as far as they're not from Israel, and yet they are recorded as the first ones to worship Christ. That's mind blowing, to be honest, if you really think about the implications, because the Jewish people are waiting for the Jewish Messiah to save the Jewish nation, and yet these outsiders are the first to worship. I mean, that's nuts.
It's very strange and amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's really quite a.
The gifts that they bring are also strange and amazing. I mean, the whole thing is just.
Yeah.
The flight to Egypt afterward, but
right.
That's not an Advent.
No, it's still. But this is
This
is why I like Advent so much, is because it always brings up all these. It's always weird to me. Like, and I love it. I love the Advent narrative, because there's always all these things where it's like, man, this is just not how anybody would do it.
No fiction writer would come up with that.
No.
Why would you think of these weird things to go together? They
Right.
don't. They don't. They're all abstract, but they all point to a thing.
Right, and they all have meaning. There's meaning,
Yeah.
but it's not. Yeah, you're right. It's not inherent. You wouldn't find it. You wouldn't just think of it like that. Yeah. Well, I think, man, that was a lot.
Sorry.
It was good. I'm gonna actually have to. I'm gonna edit this, and then go back and listen to it again, just so I can pick out some pieces I want to think about some more, because that was really helpful in a lot of ways. Thought provoking. From the sermon dissector himself, Kirk Stockman. All right. Well, we're gonna wrap it up for here, but we will have one more Advent podcast. In 2 weeks, we'll be almost done with Advent, but that'll be the last Advent podcast. And then we get into the new year, which we'll have to wait and see what that brings.
Nothing but fun.
Nothing but fun. Yeah, because I'm still working out some kinks on the sermon map for this year. But it'll all come together.
I've got ideas.
But for now, Advent.
Whoa.
Not grammatically.
Excellent.
Yes. Yeah. No.
And then the podcast went off the cliff.
It's not for now, and then the human Advent.
Oh, God.
For now, grammatical punctuation, Advent. All right. Well, thanks, Kirk. This has been a blast. We'll see all of our listeners next time.
Both of them.